This is stage 2 of the Letterhead project. This is what your file would look like at the end of stage 2. So let's backtrack and go to the file at the end of stage 1. This is what your document should look like after stage 1. So to begin on stage 2, if you want to follow in your textbook, you can turn to page 33. Stage 2, creating basic page elements. We're going to start off by creating a simple line, and I'm going to open up my Properties panel and examine my file. So it should be a letter size document set up to 8.5 by 11 inches. In portrait mode, we have one page and our margins are set. 2 inches on the top, 1.75 on the bottom, and 0.75 on the left and right. Now we're going to use the line tool. If you look at the toolbar on the left, it's the diagonal line, and you can click on the line tool. And then you can click somewhere near the bottom of your page and hold down the Shift key to constrain it to a straight line, and then drag all the way to the right side of the red bleed margin. So start on the left bleed margin and end at the right bleed margin. And you should be using the default fill and stroke, which gives it a default stroke of 1 point filled with none. We're going to go ahead and use the property panel to change the stroke to 2 points. You can click on the up arrow to bring it up to 2 points. You can also do that up in the control panel. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see that line better. Now we're going to add some points to the line because we want to make it like kind of a zigzag line and then turn it into a Bezier curve. However, I'm going to show you the textbook way to do that, and then also I'm going to show you how you can do that with the pen tool, which is my preferred choice. So you can choose which way you prefer. So using the line tool, I'm going to zoom in again, holding down the Z for zoom and clicking with my mouse. And then I'm going to switch to my pen tool. So that's right underneath the line tool, or you can use the shortcut P for pen. And before I do that, I'm going to go back to my selection tool. So select the black selection tool or the letter V, and then using my property panel, I just want to place that line at exactly 9.75 on the y-axis, so that you can do that here using the property panel. Then I'm going to switch to my pen tool and place some anchor points on here. So I'm going to look at my ruler at the top. If you don't see your rulers on your X and Y axis, just go to, you can use the shortcut Command R to turn your rulers on or off. And I'm going to look for 4.5. So I want 4.5, and I'm going to place a point at the 4.5 mark on my line. So you can see where that plus sign is on the pen tool. I'm going to click right on top of the line, and now I created a point on top of that line. The next point, I want to move my cursor over to the 6-point mark on the x-axis and then place a point there. Then I can switch to the direct selection tool, which is the white arrow, or the letter A is the shortcut. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more now again and use my hand tool to move along here. So going to my selection tool, or the direct selection tool, the white one, I'm going to click on the end of the line here, and I'm going to drag it down. I'm going to Control Z or undo that. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click. Sometimes this is a little bit tricky to get it to move. I just want to move that line segment and not the entire line. So there I go. Now I'm holding down the Shift key and I can move just that right line segment down. And I want to move it down to about 10.2 on the y-axis, so you can see where the guides show up there in the gray box. And you may want to just check to make sure your smart guides are on. So if you go to View, Grids, and Guides, make sure that Smart Guides, it has a check by it. So now we've got this zigzag line, but we need to move some of these points over to the exact right position on the document. So the bottom line here should be at 10.2. Then if you click on the point, that first point there, we want to place that at 4.875 on the x-axis. So again, using the properties panel, I'm just going to type in 4.875 and hit return. So that's a way that you can precisely input measurements for points or lines using the properties panel, or you can do that in the control panel at the very top. And now we've created this zigzag line. I'm going to add some guidelines now. So if you just place your cursor right on top of the ruler, I am just going to drag to create a guideline at 4.875, a vertical guideline, then another guideline at about 5.8 or 5.9. And these, I'm not going to be checking these numbers on your documents if they're not exactly the same. So I just want to get the general idea to make sure you know how to do these techniques. And then I'm going to put a guideline here for the top of the line and then one for the bottom, which is about 10.2. Now I'm going to show you the other method. So I'm actually going to delete that and I'm going to start over using the pen tool. So the first time we used the line tool, now I'm going to use the pen tool and I'm just going to create that zigzag line using the pen tool. So I'm going to start at that red bleed margin and I'm going to hold down the shift, I'm going to click, then hold down the shift key, release your mouse, then click at the first intersecting point to create a straight line. I'm going to release the shift key because now I want a diagonal line. I'm going to click on this next lower intersection. Hold down the shift key again because now I want to constrain it to a straight horizontal line and click on the right side where the red bleed margin is. And now I've created that same zigzag, and this is at the default 1-point stroke. So I can again make that 2 points by just clicking on the up arrow in my properties pane. So that was a lot faster to me. It was a lot easier to do it with a pen tool than to start off with the line tool and add points. But now you can see that both ways of how to do it. Now we're still in the pen tool, and what we want to do is we want to create a shape out of this line. So we start out with a line. Now we want to make it a curved line, and then we're going to create a shape, a custom shape out of it. So I'm going to put I'm actually going to go to my pen tool and hold down the mouse to find the nested tools and click on the convert direction point tool to select that. And I'm going to click on top of that first point, and I want to click and drag to the right, and I'm going to hold down the shift key at the same time to make my handlebars straight. So just drag you'll see those two handlebars coming from the left and right. Keep dragging until, look in the property pane and you see the X coordinate is changing. So I want it to read 5.625. So once that reads 5.625, then you can release the mouse and the shift key. And now I've converted it to a curve. Now I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go to Edit, Undo, Modify Path, or you can do Command Z on the Mac. I'm going to zoom in here again so you can see a little bit better what's going on, and keep your eye on the property pane for the XY coordinate. So I'm in the Convert Direction tool. I'm clicking on that first point, hold down the shift key, drag to the right until the X coordinate reads 5.625, and then release. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the second point down below, but I'm going to drag to the right until it reads, I believe it's 6.5. So I'm going to hold down my shift key, click, drag to the right, look at the handlebars, then look at my Y coordinate, or I'm sorry, my X coordinate should read 6.5. So when it reads 6.5, then I can release my mouse and the shift key. And now I've created this Bezier curve. So we've converted the point to a curve, we've converted the straight line to a curve, and this is a vector graphic. So we have a vector curve. It was a line, and now it's a Bezier curve. It's made up of points and mathematical components. And we could enlarge this to any size and we're not going to lose any quality because it's not resolution based. So now that we have this line, we want to make it into a shape. So I'm going to switch back to my pen tool. I'm going to click on the shortcut, the letter P on the keyboard, and I'm going to click on the left side of that line. So when you see that kind of slanted line next to the pen, I'm going to click on it. Then I'm going to hold down the Shift key again to constrain it to a straight line. Click on the next corner of the red bleed margin. Then I'm still holding down the Shift key. I'm going to click on the right corner. Then I'm going to release the Shift key and hover over that right side of the line where you see that open circle next to the pen tool. I'm going to click, and that means I'm going to close the path. So now I have just created a closed path. So make sure at that end you see that open circle next to the pen. That's telling you that you are about to close the path, and that's what I want. So now that I have a closed path, I want to fill this shape with black. Right now it's set to the default, a 1-point stroke of black filled with no color. I'm going to go to the tool panel or the toolbar and click on this. Right next to the default fill-in stroke is the swap fill-in stroke button. So if I click on the swap fill-in stroke curved double-headed arrow, it's going to swap it. So now it's filling the shape with black and giving it a stroke of none. So just the opposite of the default. So now I have created and closed this shape and filled it with a color. Go ahead and save your file so you don't lose your work. And now let's talk a little bit about colors. So we will get into more color later on, but for now we're going to learn about CMYK process colors. So when we're working with print, we're usually working with the process colors, and that is, if you open up your swatches here, we're going to be using CMYK coordinates. And what that means that there are only 4 colors that we are using. So we're limited to CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and K stands for key color, which is black. So those 4 colors, we can use any combinations of those colors by percentages to create other colors or simulations of colors. So that's the 4-color process system. And what we do sometimes when we have black, rather than using 100% black, sometimes that can appear kind of gray or flat. We want to create a rich black instead of a flat black by adding other percentages of the cyan, magenta, and yellow. So we're going to do that here in this exercise, and you can read more about that on page 42 in your textbook on color values. So once we've created this shape filled with the color black, make sure that if you go to the options menu at the top right of the control panel, you'll see the hamburger menu. Make sure your dimensions include stroke weight are not on. So there should not be a check mark next to it. All right. Oh, and I just accidentally checked, so I want to uncheck that. And so now we're going to create a custom rich black color. So open up your color panel. If you don't see that, go to Window, Color, and then select color. So I have mine selected here. I'm just going to click on it to open it. And I want to select that options menu and select CMYK. Then make sure you have that object selected, the shape we just created, and we can just type in a custom CMYK process color for our color. And actually in this case I thought we were going to do the rich black, but we're actually going to do that later, and we're going to create a deep green color. So for the cyan, the C, I'm going to type in just the coordinates in the book, 85, and then hit tab. Then magenta is 50, yellow is 85, and black is 40, and hit return. So now we've got this color created. I'm going to go back to my options menu and select add to swatches. Now if I go to my swatches menu, I will see that color has been added to my swatches menu, and I can select that color. So I'm going to select none for the stroke, which you see that's on the front. So I want to click on the fill button, which when I click on it, it brings that to the front, and then I can click on that green color that I just created. So now I'm filling this shape with the screen and it has no stroke color. Now we want to create a basic graphics frame. So I'm going to choose the rectangle frame tool. So I want to use the one with the X over it because that's a graphic frame because I want to place graphics into the frame later on. So click on that rectangle frame tool and then click away. Actually, I'm going to go back to my selection tool because I want to deselect this object. So make sure you don't have anything selected. So I'm going to click just on the gray. My pasteboard is gray. Yours may be a different color, but I'm going to click on that to deselect the object. Then click on the rectangle frame tool. And you can either click and drag or just click somewhere on your document and type in the size if you know the size for your shape. So I know I want this rectangle to be a square and I want it to be 1.25 inches. So I'm going to type in 1.25 and hit tab, then hit 1.25 again for the height. Click OK. And now I've created a square that's 1.25 inches. Then I'm going to use my selection tool and move this up here within my page margins. And I want to place it. I'm trying to see if the textbook gives me a number here. So I'm going to open up my properties panel and I want to type in the X coordinate 1 and hit tab and make sure you select the bottom left reference point in your reference grid here. So it's going to place this object at the bottom within the bottom left reference point of this grid, and then for the Y coordinate I'm just going to type in 9. So it's going to sit at the 1, 9, XY coordinate point on the XY axes. All right, I want to create some more of these squares. So I want to have a series of squares and I want them to be all identical. So now I'm with this first square selected. I'm going to hold down the Option key on the Mac and click and drag to the right. And if you have your smart guides turned on, you'll see those green lines showing you that you can align it to the top, bottom, and the center. So I want to place it where it's about 1/8 of an inch distance from that first square, and then when it's at 1/8 of an inch distant, you can release the mouse and the Option key. And so that's cloning. So I've just cloned this square and I've used the smart guides to make sure that they're aligned. I want to repeat that. So there's several different ways to do that. So another way, now that I've cloned it, I'm going to do the same thing and hold down the Option key and click and drag again. And now you'll see because I have 3 of these, let me just show you that again. So I'm going to clone this second square, holding down the Option key and drag to the right. And you'll see those double-headed arrows showing up between each square, and that's showing you where to place that last square so that they're equidistant from each other. So I'm going to when it's equidistant, I'm going to release the Option key and the mouse at the same time, and now I have 3 equally distanced squares. Another way I can duplicate this is I can go up to Object, Transform Again, and Transform Again, and that's just going to repeat the same step that I did. Alright, so I can also go to Edit and then select Duplicate, and that does the same thing. So now I have 5 squares that are equally distant apart. So there are some other things I want to do with these 5 squares. So later on I'm going to place graphics inside of them, but I want to align them and then I want to close up the gap. Even though we wanted to make sure that the space was equal in between them, we want to close that space up right now. So I want to select all of these, so I'm going to click on my pasteboard again here and then drag a marquee across all 5 of these squares to select all of them. Then I'm going to grab that right handlebar and press and hold down the space bar. Okay, so make sure you hold down the space bar, click and then hold down the space bar and drag to the left, and you will see that the space, that gap in between the square, closes. So keep dragging to the left until it closes. Now the squares don't change shape or size, just the gap, and that's called live distribution. So you're just redistributing those squares. Now I can release the space bar and my mouse, and I just closed the gap in between the squares. Now another thing I'm going to do is I want to reduce the width of all this entire grouping of squares. So I'm going to grab that center right handlebar on the right square again, and then this time I'm not going to hold down the space bar, but I'm going to drag to the left until the cursor shows the width of 5.5. You can use the properties panel to look at that. So click and drag to the left until the width is 5.5. You can also see it in that gray reference area there. So when it's about 5.5, I can release my mouse. So now you see that was not live distribution because the width of the squares changed, but I was able to do that for this entire grouping. Now I want to align these squares so that they're placed inside this green object that I created. And we want to use the Align tool, which I have open here. If you don't see that, just go to Window, Object and Layout, and select Align. So I want to make sure that you align to the selection. So I'm selected all these 5 graphic frames. I'm going to hold down the Shift key because I want to select this green object too. So now all of this is selected. Let me go back and go ahead and group these items by going to Object, Group, or Command G. Hold down the Shift key to select the green shape as well. Then go back to the Align panel and make sure you're aligning to the selection. Then click to align the left edges. There we go. So now we're aligning this group with this green shape, and we're going to align the bottom. So we've just lined the left edges of these 2 objects, and the bottoms of the 2 objects are aligned. Now we're going to add a stroke. So I'm going to deselect by clicking on the pasteboard, and then I want to select that grouping of the graphic frames, and I want to use either the properties panel or you can use the control panel, and I want to select the stroke color of paper, and I want to give it a stroke of 3 points. So we're just giving this white border around all the graphic frames. Then I'm going to make this right square have a rounded corner so that it matches this curve. So I can double click to select the right square, or you can use your direct selection tool or the letter A to isolate this frame from the group. Go back to your properties panel and select corner. And I can just change one of the corners. So the upper right corner, I want to select rounded, and then I want to customize the roundness by typing in 0.45 inches. And if you select preview, you can see what that does, so that it's more aligned to that curve, and click OK. So again, we're just learning some techniques here so you know how you can modify shapes and create custom objects and shapes. We're not really learning so much about design at this point. We'll do that. You'll have more creative freedom to design once you do your personal project. And that concludes stage 2.